All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to the Hall of Fame podcast. I'm super excited to have a special guest who hits Hall of Fame like 3 or 4 times a year because he does so much. He writes so much insurance. My buddy Steve Giordano.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Dude, thanks for taking the time to hop on. I wanted to go through. So this year, it's through April. Basically, you were at 434,000 on your personal pen, right?
Yep.
Last year, you did 1.3 million, and then total since you've been with FFL for like 2.5 years, you're like 2.5 million total.
Sir.
And then your team's doing $600,000 a month, right?
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of good stuff. But I remember earlier we were talking today, and people were like, how are you the best agent in the company? And you're like, I don't know that I am. I just buy the most leads in the company. So can you kind of go, talk about your mindset? Because you buy like, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 worth of leads a week, pretty unapologetically, right? To be able to write what you write. So can you kind of go through what it was like from when you were a new agent buying less leads to what you did to like change your mindset, and then how you found leads and became obsessed with making sure you had perfect lead flow?
Yeah, I think getting great at leads is the game. So early on, I remember my first month I bought about 4,000 in leads, and I listened to Mark, my mentor, which anybody, your upline is going to steer you in the right direction, so certainly listen to them. And I saw I was able to write 21 and kind of just figuring stuff out. And then I learned the game of diversity and trying to get different types and styles and not falling in love with one over the other. And I think even, you look back 2.5 years ago, leads have evolved here.
Right.
You didn't have instant leads. It was mortgage and Facebook. And now you have mortgage, Facebook, and instants and life leads. You have all these, a plethora of different leads to jump into. And I just started learning like, okay, if I wrote 21 on 4, and the next month I think I did like 34 on 5, and then it was like 57 on 6. I'm like, I'm not
adds up.
I'm not really great at math, but I can figure that out, And I was like, all right, if I want it right, I can write and buy whatever I want to write at the end of the day, depending on what I buy and what I work.
So when you started as a brand new agent, you'd made some money in other industries, but did you just have $4,000 laying around that was like totally like that you could have thrown out the window of your car and not cared about when you started?
No, my back was against the wall, mortgage, wife,
Yeah.
a little bit of money in the bank, but dropping $4,000 on something I didn't necessarily know how to do yet was scary.
So how did you wrap your mind around that and decide I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do the mistake where most people do is they spend $400 for their first month, right? How'd you go? I'm going to do $4,000, which obviously is scaled to where you almost do that a week now. But how did you, when you were brand new, decide, okay, I'm going to start here and go all in?
I think I looked at it like a business because I worked in the restaurant industry, and I knew that you needed to fund a month, and you really had to look more the month than the week, So I kind of just mapped that out to say, all right, I have to go the month and then believe that every week I'm going to get cash flow. And then in talking to people, it was, okay, if you put out 4 and you go to work and you wrote, 21 and what our comp levels are and the advance, like you'll never be really out the money. You're just putting it out on a credit card. And then by the time the bill comes, you've paid it like 4 times over.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned the comp level too. One thing that FFL does that is different from a lot of other companies is you can get up to a 130. I know the one right behind me is a lot outdated because we go to 145 now, but you can get up to a 130 from personal production. So, I mean, were you always chasing that from the beginning? Like, hey, I'm going to just try to get my comp as high as I can? Or were you thinking about, because when I was in the field, that was always my goal, dude. It was like, okay, 2 months and then we got our next raise. Now what do we do the next one? Did you chase that down as a personal producer?
I don't think I even understood it that well in the beginning, and then I started catching on to it. It took a little bit of time. I was like, first I was trying to survive.
Right.
You're trying to figure it out. And then I was like, okay, I'm having a little bit of prosperity. And I'm going to try and tweak and then try and just ramp it up.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember I was always like, I did math, and it's because I'm a nerd, right? But I was like, I did math on it. I'm like, okay, so I'm writing 50 grand a month. I'm at a 110. If I get to a 115, an extra 5% of 50,000 a month, that's a lot of money, right? And I was like, okay, now we got to get all the raises. I'm getting to 145,
That's right.
So that's how I started thinking. And I think, but it helped me because it gave me something to chase after. I just didn't know did you have anything that kind of let you chase after, and because you're a competitive guy, right? And I know you want to take care of your family and your wife and your kid and all that sort of stuff is great. But did you have any other things that you did to kind of keep yourself motivated and moving forward all the time in the field?
I think the culture of FFL kept me motivated.
Mm-hmm.
I'd see you on the leaderboard, Porcina, Rob, the names go on and on and on. And I was like, I can't like sleep in or slack off because like Zach's out like on a travel trip somewhere, God knows where, running insurance, and we're all competitive and we want to win. So I just kept that going. I was like, I'm just going to keep going and going and going and not stop. And then it just really adds up from there.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun too because all the top producers share stuff with each other. Like I do this is what I do for my lead flow, right? Like when you were getting good in the business, what did you do to really accelerate your learning curve?
I think listening to a lot of trainings in the car. I knew nothing coming into this business, so I really needed to just engulf myself in it. So listening to a lot of stuff, calling people after appointments that I maybe didn't close, trying to take different angles, forming relationships with some people, not talking to a million people, but a select few that were top people that could give me little tweaks of things that I could do better.
Yeah, because now that you have a big team and you guys are growing and headed towards that $1 million a month, do you see that now with some of your agents where you're like, dude, why are you talking to this guy? Like you're doing 20, he's doing 20. Why are you trying to learn from him?
Yeah.
Did you ever fall into that trap or how did you think about something like that?
I never did because I remember that first convention I was at. I remember specifically we were at a dinner or a lunch or something, and you were, you had a monster year that year, and I was like, I want to talk to him.
And monster year that year was like $400,000, which was crazy.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah. It's crazy. But I just wanted to talk to those people. Same thing on the building side. You want to talk to people that are doing it at a high level because you want to be there.
Yeah, I don't know where I heard it from, but I remember someone said one time, you should only ask people for advice who are doing at least double what you're doing. And I was like, okay, cool. Or where you want to be, right? But that was at least double where I was at. So I'm like, okay, if I'm at 1 million and I'm trying to grow my business to 2 million, or if we're at 1.75, I'm trying to get to 3.5 million, I need to be talking to people who are doing at least 3.5 million to figure out how to get there, right?
Absolutely.
But I think a lot of people go, because how dangerous is that when you're at, you're starting out, you're at 10K, and then you talk to the dude that's been here for 6 months who's also at 10K. Like what good can come from that conversation?
No, you're just going to basically like kind of complain to each other.
Yeah.
And go back and forth.
But then they call you and you go, dude, you ran 8 appointments this week. Why don't you work a little bit?
Yeah.
Right?
Basically.
So I think one thing I've heard from a lot of people is, or I think people perceive and they see how much business you write and they probably go like, Steve never has bad days in the field. Like, do you have stretches where you have a day where you don't sell anything or you only see a couple people? Like, does that happen to you too?
It definitely happens. I think I have fewer of them because I know how to put the numbers in my favor. I'll literally go out with a full day and I'll still dial to book other stuff because I just know there are things that maybe weren't very solid that I booked, and I'd rather go call something that's solid. I'll door knock. I don't have a lot of blank days.
Yeah.
I might not have every day a monster day, but I said it in a training earlier. I'm the compiler Hall of Famer, right?
Right.
Where you have the guy who's the Hall of Famer who's like the really talented baseball player who just can coast on his talent. I've never looked at myself that way. I'm the guy who's just going to keep coming and coming and coming, and the stuff is going to add up and add up and add up.
So what does a full day in the field look like for you? Like how many appointments? And then if you're ranking them, one being like, I'm not going to be there tomorrow, and you go, okay, I'm going to drop it off anyway, so it's not an appointment. And 10 being they give you directions to your house and say, I'm going to have my medicine and checkbook waiting for you.
Yeah.
Like how many appointments do you set a day? And then what do you think the average you would rank them would be?
I'm an 8 appointment guy. I try to be 9 to 9, in South Florida, I'll have stretches. It's almost like 45 minutes between every appointment, I'd say on average. I'd say for the most part, 5 out of 8 are going to be over a 7 on your meter. I don't book a lot of like phony ones, a couple of quick sets here and there. Where I kind of know what I'm getting into.
Where they're like, I'll be home from work at 5, and you're like, all right, great, see you at 6, like something along those lines.
Yeah, something along those lines. I try to limit them as much as possible, and then, when you buy enough leads and they're coming in every day, it's every morning, bang, I just printed out 7, and I'll just go and rebook, and then, now with a team, I can send some things off to people, stuff like that. But I want to go out feeling where everything's in my control.
Yeah. And then obviously you have a very good mindset, right? So what do you do to, like if you have a bad day, right, where, everything hits the fan, you have 8 appointments, you sit with 2 of them, one of them tells you no, and you write one app for $30. Like what do you do to keep your mind sharp so the next day you don't let it carry over? Because I remember I was talking to Jake, and he's good at that too. But he had a weekend where he went 0 for 15, and then on Tuesday he went 0 for 10. And I'm like, dude, he's like second in the company, right?
Yeah,
like right behind you, like, or not right behind, like 40, 50 grand behind you.
Yeah.
And then he wrote like 22 grand the next day. And I think there's a different mindset there. So like, what do you do to keep your mind sharp where you don't let the bad day drag on for the whole month?
I think you have to believe in the longevity that you've kind of created for yourself, understanding that good things are coming. You just have to find them. And where are they? They're in the next batch of leads that you're buying. Because when you turn the cash flow machine on, which I tell people, if I spent 4 and did 21, the cash flow machine has not been off now for almost 2.5 years, whatever it is. So you have to believe and understand that, and early on understand that, and just know that if you dwell on one bad thing, you're missing out on focusing on the next 10 great things that are coming. So you have to you got to just keep going, and then magic happens. You just find magic all the time.
Yeah. So your goal is just not to quit, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing that's the toughest in this industry is some new agents, they just, they don't have the capacity to just kind of keep going in the face of adversity.
Right. And I think that's why people like yourself and, Jake and Rob, who you mentioned, get paid well, right? Because like people get paid well in a capitalistic society for doing stuff other people don't or won't do, right? And so you're willing to deal with all the BS, and then all of a sudden on the other side of that, you write $1.5 million a year, right? But not every day is rainbows and sunshine. But the good's coming if you just keep pushing through it, right?
And it's funny because people see that number and they're like, "That's so glorious," and this and that.
It's a lot of work.
It's blood, sweat, and tears. It's hot South Florida. It's driving around all day for 12 hours, getting some no's, no shows, what have you. But you just keep going, and then it adds up.
So to write that much, how many hours did you work a week, do you think, between dialing, and running appointments and all that sort of stuff?
So you figure, we'll say 48, 12 hours on the 4 run days, right? So it's 48 there. Dialing, I mean, if I'm dialing, maybe 12 hours of dialing. Obviously there's agency stuff and what have you, but I mean, so 48 and 12. So what's that? 60 hours, like who wouldn't work 60 hours for 1.3 million? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you probably grossed $1 million and netted, high 6-figure income last year. Right. Yeah. So I think most people go, I would do that. But then when the road meets the road, they're like, it's a lot of work. Like, well, I have my cousin's baby's nephew's barbecue next week on Saturday. I got to miss it, where you're like, dude, I got to run.
Yeah.
That's one thing I wanted to ask you too, before we get a couple more minutes where we can ask a couple more questions. What do you do as far as schedule and not letting stuff like that? I know there's an extreme example, but not letting something like, a friend's birthday or like a barbecue or something like that get in the way of your schedule and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think you just tweak some things. If you know that you have something on a Saturday night, like, cool, go do it. And then make it up. Hey, run an appointment after you dialed on Thursday or on Monday night. But make your number your number. Like I tell new agents, if you run 30 appointments, you're going to run into 5 layups every week. You just are. I don't care who it is, you're going to run into them. But the only way you're going to run into 5 layups is if you have 30 appointments. You're not going to do it on 8.
Right.
So play that number. If there's one thing I'm crazy fanatical about, it's like dialing at 8 a.m. and then my appointment count for the next 2 days. That's it. Yeah. Only thing I can control.
So do you run 30 a week, but do you set it a monthly goal too for your appointments?
I never have. I've always just looked weekly.
So like say something comes up with you and you and the wife, Margaret, you guys are going out of town or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you can only run 15 appointments that week. Do you just automatically add it into the next week? Like you don't even think about it?
Yeah, I guess I have. I feel like we haven't really went anywhere in a while because of COVID and everything. It was actually a blessing because you're able to work more, and now when everything opens back up, you have financial freedom where you can do whatever you want. So yeah, I'd say you tack a little bit on here and there on both sides of the weeks.
That makes sense. What I wanted to dive into a little bit is now you're growing a big business, and a lot of people that write a lot of business sometimes have a hard time taking a step back and being empathetic for new age. Like we sort of forget what it was like when you're brand new, right? It's hard to be empathetic. And also the other thing is you have all your leads. You're like, dude, these are my leads. Like, get away from my leads, right? Like, get your hands off my leads, dude. But like, and I know you're working on changing that mindset a lot where you're like, how can I help my new people get up and going and make it about them, not about me? What are some pitfalls you would, someone who's writing 5, 6, 7, $1 million a year, like what are some things you can tell them to avoid that are some landmines you've stepped on as you're trying to build a business as a really high producer?
Yeah, I think you need to balance it pretty well. I think it's a challenge, but I think if you can balance and communicate with your team and find out their why and find out what they're looking to do and give to them in comp, in leads, in your time, as long as they're working. I think if you can do all those things, the magic for me at this point is seeing other people on my team be successful.
Right.
Like, I don't care. What I write right now at this point is the sword that I'm using in my business to grow the business. It's not about like, buying boats and yachts and stuff like that. It's about helping other people, because the more people we're able to influence here, the more we're all going to have, know, and we're a company that has that culture. So I think that's something for a while I had to get a little bit away from, like you said, the pitfall of totally worrying about personal production. Now I'm more worried about what's my team doing. Is my team eating? Is my team being prosperous?
Yeah, I remember having to make that shift too. Like probably midway through last year, I'm like, all right, it's great like being top 5 agent in the company. It's fun. But what I started thinking was, I was like, what would be cooler than this is if I had like 3 or 4 agents in the top 10.
Yep.
And then I don't know that was like what I somehow processed in my mind. I'm like, all right, I made the shift. Now I'm like, okay, like, can we help, Easton and Jake and Brittany and these other people that are coming up? Like, what can I do to help them get here? Because I don't want to be the only one up there. I want to prove that we can teach other people to do the same. That's the whole point of what we do, right?
Yep. Duplication.
Yeah. Did you have to make that mind shift switch a little bit as well?
Absolutely. I think you have to think as the business owner and not as you're the business, because you don't want to be the business forever.
Right.
God forbid something happens to you and your income's cut off, you're done.
Right.
You have to build something big here. And what better platform and opportunity is there than FFL to do that?
Yeah. I bet if you had asked me like a year and a half ago, like, hey, you have a stud coming on, but you have to give them all your leads in your local area, I think I would have been like, I'm not down, right?
Yeah.
Like, those are my leads. I'm writing a bunch of business. I can't do that. But now if I'd be like, yeah, give them all the leads. I'll figure something else out. I'll go travel somewhere else, whatever.
Right.
I mean, I know we talked about it. You've started to do the same thing, giving some leads away to people and shifting them off to them. Have you seen that help start your business to explode a lot by giving them some easy wins? Like, here's a couple mortgage leads right in your backyard. Why don't you go run these?
Yeah, because I think, number one, they're appreciative of it. They know that you don't have to do that, but you're doing it because you want to really help them. You have to really communicate that message. Like, I want you to win. I don't want you to fail. And we're here for you to be successful.
Awesome, dude. Well, hey, thank you for the insight and taking the time to get on with us. I have no doubt that you may still write $1 million this year, but more importantly, your team's going to be doing $1 million, $1.5 million by the end of the year. I have no doubt.
That's the goal, my friend.
What's your goal as far as, I know you've crushed personal production. What's your goal as far as team production by the end of 2021?
I think like 1.2 would be a reasonable number. I really like to push for 1.5 by the end of December. We're getting a new office, adding some staff. I have downline managers that are adding staff. So I think we're right there. We're just ready for the explosion, but we're right there.
Cool. Well, we'll call it 1.5, dude. I have no doubt. So thanks for getting on, Buez. Thank you as always, man. I appreciate you, and everyone have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you, brother.